Hello everyone, it is another session of Excellence Talk. Together with Christian Forstner, we have an important guest now from United States, from Washington, Patricia Froyo, certified executive coach and business transformation expert. Her mission is to help leaders create strategic breakthroughs in their careers and business. So she's the right person that we will talk about leadership. Hello, Patricia. How
Hi,
are you?
Murat. Hi, Christian. I'm doing wonderful. Thank you. I'm so pleased to be with you guys.
Let me just introduce you with a couple of words, Pati. What a pleasure and an honor for us to have you. Since today's topic is around leadership in times of change. And if you observe day by day changes in the world around us that tries to unwind from the grips of COVID-19, then I think we all can easily see good, not so good and bad behavior of leaders. Leading whole countries, leading large, smaller organizations. So with your help, Pati, we'd like to understand better how good and effective leadership can support transformation, agility, innovation, and even excellence. And maybe what the success factors are that determine good leadership behavior, specifically in difficult times like now. Pati.
Yeah, and that's when we need leadership the most, right? So that linkage that we see in between leadership and, say, business excellence, to put it in the context of where we are, and in the context of the changing world, it all ends and starts and ends with leadership, right? Or I should say, it starts with and ends by leadership. And in my experience, leadership is what sets the vision. And that vision inspires in an organization the cultural imperatives that deliver that vision. And really, the biggest threat is lack of leadership resilience, is that lack of staying power, lack of consistency, lack of conviction. That it's so easy, right, for the organization to detect that, and to basically we lose the buy-in of the organization, and that inevitably concludes in us resolving the wrong problem and being vulnerable to disruptions, right? And those disruptions come from the market, they come from changing customer needs, they even come sometimes when the organization loses faith in the leadership, right? So, in my view, the antidotes to kind of these threats and these disruptions really come in these cultural imperatives that are adaptability and agility. What is it that we're seeking to create to have that ecosystem? So as leaders, at least what I have seen work in this, is we're seeking to create a growth mindset. Mm-hmm. We're seeking to create an environment where people are collaborating mm-hmm. in experimentation, in risk-taking, in innovation. And all of that, kind of, to really wrap it up, leads the organization to think strategically and to do the scenario planning they need to be adaptable and agile, right? So that's kind of what we're looking for. And why is it that I'm saying that adaptability and agility are important, particularly in these times? Because that's what allows the whole organization mm-hmm. to be nimble and to be dynamic, so they can actually anticipate, adapt, and respond to the changing market conditions. So that's kind of the context, I think, as leaders, we need to think about.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm just thinking, I see so many different leadership behaviors around the world, maybe politicians or business people or whatever. So I keep thinking while you talk, we all know there are born leaders, right? Leaders who obviously, were born to lead. And then there are so many others who were obviously not born to lead. What can you, how can you help leaders to develop a style that supports all the values that you've just described?
You're right. There are some people that are natural leaders, but I think that effective leadership behaviors can be learned and can be nurtured and can be built and perfected, right? And I would start first with the intention and the mindset of the leader, okay? And let me give you an analogy that may be a bit kind of light and funny, but I think it articulates this. It's like lead like Yoda would lead. Yoda from Star Wars, right? And that means, just feel comfortable with a range of paradoxes that as a leader we need to grapple and manage through. So on one hand, I think we need to be supportive and also hold people accountable for results, right? We need to foster experimentation and learning, and also have high standards for performance. So you see where these dichotomies and these paradoxes are going, but that's the range, right, that we need to manage. We need to be patient, because if we're not patient, we can rush to a suboptimal solution, right? But at the same time, we need to keep the organization and maintain that urgency that we need to meet the market demands. And then I think that the last mindset, lastly, is kind of, we need to foster collaboration. But it comes a point in time where the leader needs to make a decision. And where the leader knows that the time for debate kind of has passed. Because a lot of the very collaborative leaders have some decisiveness issues, and that also brings in itself some problems, right? So, kind of that's the mindset and the intention. So now let's get a little bit practical, and I like things in three. And when I coach my executive clients, I try to kind of simplify things. And to me, the three key leadership behaviors would be self-management, team development, and inclusive leadership. Those are the three that I would focus on. In self-management, it's very much about letting go of the ego. So forget about how important you are. Forget about everything your role in the organization, your stature. And what I think is really key is focus on delivering value. Focus on delivering value to the enterprise, all of the people you interact with, and in everything you do. The danger with that is that, we can go too deep in adding value. We can become too intense, right? And too intrusive. So to complement that in this self-management, know to sense the impact you have in others. And then have enough maturity and emotional intelligence to be able to manage it and flex your style dynamically enough so you accommodate and you adapt to the circumstances and to the people you are surrounded by, right? And one of the things that I find very helpful is when we are triggered. If we pause and ask ourselves, who do I want to be now? How do I want to show up? So it's like if we treat every moment that's like this crucial, critical moment as one that's going to define our legacy, I think it puts us in a place where we can be our best self. And this is a very simple practice, right? It's like a question, who do I want to be now? How do I want to show up? Whichever is the one that you like the best. And it's good because it pauses you enough to be able to kind of detach from the emotions of the trigger. It helps you center and then really kind of be in a point of choice where you can decide where to go next, right? So then once we know how to manage ourselves, then, the next thing is team development.
Yeah.
One of our key jobs is to make sure everybody in our organization has everything they need to do their job and perform at their very best, right? And that, has several levers. One is we need to develop ourselves. It's like put your oxygen mask first and then help others. And then we need to really purposefully develop our people. And the last part, which kind of some leaders either miss or don't really focus on, is how do you architect the whole team to perform at their very best? And that has to do with who do you pair up with whom, who do you challenge, who do you delegate to, all of those things, all of those dynamics we need to have in addition to ourselves, the individuals, and kind of the whole team. And what really kind of makes all of these team development clicks, coaching culture that we want to create. Because a good leader is one that does not tell their people how to do their job, right? But a good leader enables them to do the job well, and enables the people to have the confidence in their skills to do that job as best as they can. And that is kind of the kind of leadership and kind of team development focus that we want to have. And that brings a lot of empowerment when people feel that their leadership have confidence in their abilities. So that's kind of that second part of team development. And to me, the secret sauce is the third one, right? Because these behaviors build on each other and they also reinforce each other. But without the third is we wouldn't have the ecosystem to be able to really kind of sustain and unleash itself. And that's this inclusive leadership or leading inclusively. And leading inclusively does have the assumption that we have diversity. To unleash that diversity, we need an inclusive culture, right? So, and the question is, so how do we create this inclusive culture, right? And inclusion is all about perception, right? You may try to be inclusive, but at the end, what we really need to make sure is that the receiver perceives they're being included, right? And I think that what most of the studies indicate is that this perception is really driven by a few key factors. Respect, that we're being valued, that we're being treated fairly, right? And that we belong, that we belong to the team. And in this belonging to the team, it's where we have the confidence that we can contribute without fear, that we can share our ideas. And then in that kind of dynamic sharing of ideas, this is where we get this collective intelligence, I want to say explosion, right? But, and then it needs to get channeled. But this is where the leader is critical in creating this psychological safety. Because it is with the psychological safety that we have the trust and the empowerment. That those two things are key, right? Trust and empowerment, because then I am safe and keen to contribute. I am safe and keen to share, but most importantly, I am safe and keen to challenge. Because this is the ultimate test of inclusive organization, the challenging part, because it is in the challenge that we're innovative. And in that intellectual friction is what all happens. And when we feel safe to respectfully and constructively have that intellectual friction, then we're having this inclusive organization. It's so simple that sometimes it really pains me when it doesn't happen, because it's just simply being human. It's being human and being vulnerable, not needing to be right, accepting mistakes. And one of the key things that, and this is kind of a little bit going back to that self-management, one of the key things is being harmless. Treating people in a way in which we are not overpowering them. but that we are really demonstrating that we're open and approachable to challenge, to input, to feedback, you know, kind of all of those things where we're allowing that environment of trust and empowerment. And there is a lot of theories about the effectiveness of leading through questions instead of answers, right? So it's all of these of how do you engage and you really get the potential of your people, right, to kind of flow through and being inclusive, which is, you know, definitely not an easy task, because, you know, we may think that we're being inclusive when we really are not. And this is why it's really important to be approachable to feedback, so that your own people tell you, you know, we should be including this person, or, you know, this is a better person to take care of that, or the way you responded here. You know, you know, one of the things that I really liked to do was kind of the postmortems of critical meetings, where I would have the, you know, brave people in my organization say, you were a bit too quick to turn that down, right? And then, you know, and then having the courage the next time to go and say, you know, guys, I think I may have been wrong in offering my opinion here, and maybe we should circle back and explore that area a bit more. You know, so having that type of behavior for me is kind of how we make an inclusive culture happen. If a leader wants to be or wants to create an adaptable, agile, and inclusive organization, they need to embody these three behaviors, right? Which are self-management, team development, and inclusive leadership.
Pati, I've probably read and digested tons of literature about leadership over the last couple of years or even decades. And here comes Pati, and she nails down the key success factors to just three, you know, self-management, team development, and this inclusion topic. And I think I'm totally fascinated. What I keep thinking while I listen to you is, now I'm a leader, right? And I'm trying hard to do that. And I have lots of people who I lead, like you. I mean, you have many years of leadership experience. How do you think can your people, maybe your peers, maybe your customers, maybe even your suppliers, anybody around you, I think we call them stakeholders, how can they help the leader to further improve their behavior? Would that require some humbleness? Would that require to collect some perception? Could you evaluate that maybe as a practical thing?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And, you know, I think that we can learn from everybody. So, you know, you can have formal feedback. So, you know, many organizations, particularly the larger ones, have formal performance feedback that includes 360s, right? So everybody kind of provides input on you, but we can do it as well and seek it. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to do everything that the feedback says,
of course, yes.
But we need to be humble enough and know ourselves enough to be able to determine what makes most sense and where we can get the most value from. So in dealing with, for example, say a customer, right? It's like, what are we doing well and what can we do better, right? So what should we keep on doing and what should we stop doing, and, you know, where do we pivot? With peers, you know, peers is a finicky thing, because a lot of leaders hesitate to seek feedback from peers. But it is one of the most valuable, you know, feedbacks we can get. And one of the most valuable actions in leadership is to really integrate the whole leadership team. And there are some people that do it well, and they are key to the team. And I think that when leadership teams fail is when there is no collaboration, no integration, and no desire for everybody to do their best, right?
You are saying a fantastic insight. You are explaining the leadership. And if you go from the other side, if we have a ineffective leadership in the organization or outside, what are the consequences for us?
Yeah, no, I think that the consequences are dire because the first thing that happens is the employees become disengaged, right?
Mhm.
And actually, in the last, Gartner does an annual report on kind of the status of engagement, and it's just completely dire. You know, both in the States, in Europe, it's just awful. It's, you know, it's like less than 30% of the employees are engaged. So if you don't have employee engagement, then imagine, right, what happens with customer service, what happens with execution, what happens with any motivation for excellence, right? It just cannot happen. Poor leadership just demoralizes the organization. It disengages them, and then worse, it may even disenfranchise them. And I think this is what we're seeing in a lot of the organizations that, you know, have failed or maybe at risk of failure. And even in some of our societies, I think we're seeing some of that.
The leadership is the driving factor for our life. So it's a driving factor for the excellence. But the good things that you mentioned at the beginning, we can still learn it. So of course, we can learn it until a certain stage. So.
Yeah, and you know, the other thing I would say is leadership is not a position in the organization. Anybody can be a leader, right? And anybody can be a leader that has a sphere of influence. So what I would say to people is, you know, behave in a way in which you would want to be led. And then that has like this multiplying effect.
And one of my best examples of leadership is the mother of children, right? Educating children is an enormous leadership task, I think. I mean, it goes down to families, I think, if we talk about the basics of leadership, right?
And the worst thing is that there is no manual for it. Typically, there is no training.
I'd have a last question, Pati, from my side. We already talked about values. We talked about humbleness. And there is a definition of leadership that came across my life a couple of, I think, 20 years ago already. There is a place in the world somewhere where they have a leadership academy. And at the entrance gate, you see 3 words, and that is serve to lead. I'll never forget that, right? Serve to lead. And if you look at most leadership descriptions, if you look at diagrams, if you look at everything, you know, there's always a leader on top, right? And then you have all the people below. That like you know, changes that picture totally. Like putting the leader at bottom, you know, helping and supporting the whole you know, organization. Can you maybe comment on that?
Yeah. So
would serve to lead be kind of a kind of description of what you explained to us?
Yes, absolutely. So, you know what, essentially what you're doing is you're turning the pyramid, you know, in reverse. And that is that servant leadership, which is, you know, the organization is not there to serve you. You are there to serve the organization. And you are there to really set the vision. You're really there to get the resources. You're really there to maximize their potential. And then just have trust in their abilities to deliver and don't get in the way. Right? A servant leader doesn't get in the way. A servant leader is one that enables, empowers, and, you know, kind of supports the organization, but never losing track of the fact that we have high standards and we want to achieve great things.
Thank you very much, Pati.
No, thank you. It was really a pleasure to be with you guys.
It was a pleasure to have you, and it was a great insight, and we will all learn from you, and we will share with everyone that who are watching this. I want to mention that it's the 6th session of the Excellence Talk. We have it in YouTube, so you can watch all the previous sessions. Like last time that we were talking about Ubuntu and the African Excellence Model. Today we talk about leadership. You can see that there are many things that that we are sharing with other people, like example of you as an expert, Pati. And you can subscribe just in the bottom above that there is a button that you can subscribe to the YouTube channels, that you can get updated information for the next sessions.
Yeah, just thank you again. And just to the leaders out there, just remember to be, as we said, servants of your organizations, and then lead them to great things.
And my hope would be, Pati and Murat, that many people, leaders, watch this, since you nail this down, this whole very complex topic of leadership to the most important factors in just a couple of minutes. I'm totally fascinated and grateful, Pati, for sharing this with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.